hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of City Lights Live, the virtual iteration of the City Lights Events Booksellers and Publishers Events calendar. I'm your host, Peter Maravellis, and as always, we are beaming to you from the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples, also known as the San Francisco Bay Area. Today's event is brought to you by City Lights in conjunction with the fabulous Akashic Books. We are delighted to be celebrating the publication of the book, To Ease My Troubled Mind, the Authorized, Unauthorized History of Billy Childish. It's by Ted Kessler. It's published by Akashic Books. For many of us here in the Bay Area, Billy Childish has held a legendary status in the indie punk alt music scenes, the range of music. He is generator, of course, of many years, producing over 150 record albums in the areas of rock and roll, punk, blues, folk, have been remarkable to say the least. But it doesn't end there. He is also an acclaimed painter, and his life story is a compelling one to say the least. In To Ease My Troubled Mind, Ted Kessler has, over the course of a year of interviews with Billy Childish, produced a mosaic portrait of one of the most prolific and uncompromising artists of his generation. We are honored to have with us here today Billy Childish in person in conversation with Ted Kessler. We also have with us a special guest moderator. We're delighted to have the celebrated musician, songwriter, and record producer from Washington, D.C., Guy Picciotto. He is, of course, best known in his role as guitarist and co-lead vocalist in Fugazi and as lead vocalist of Rites of Spring. A few words about Ted Kessler. He is an editor, journalist, and published author. He served on the staff at the NME as a writer and editor between 1993 and 2003 before joining Q Magazine. As its editor, his published work includes the books Paper Cuts, How I Destroyed the British Music Press, and My Old Man, Tales of Our Fathers. Before we begin, I would like to let you know we're posting links with which you may purchase copies of To Ease My Troubled Mind. We have an exclusive opportunity today also. City Lights carries a full selection of books by Billy Childish. Some of them are rare and hard to find. These include some wonderfully gorgeous monographs of his artwork. Due to technical difficulties, we really could not post them on our website, but I can provide a list of these in the form of a PDF for those of you who might have an interest. All you got to do is just, email me. I'm going to post my email address, in the chat. We can send you like a PDF and you can peruse them. So it is with a great pleasure to be able to welcome Billy Childish in conversation with Ted Kessler and Guy Picciotto. Gentlemen, welcome to City Lights.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi.
So, you guys, I'd like to start first by congratulating you on the book itself, which I have to say, if I knew nothing about Billy Childish, the look alone of this book is very, very handsome. And the end papers, I will say, are also particularly splendid.
Yeah.
So congratulations so much on this. And I know it came out I think in England first, right? Before Akashic put out this edition of it. And both of them are very, very attractive books. So congratulations to you both.
Thank you very much. I mean, it's all down to Billy, although I wrote it.
Well, you mean the look, in the sense that the Yanks were really good because they let me do the cover and the end papers, whereas the British publisher's always scared of my artwork, but the Yanks fell for it.
So I was going to ask you guys, like, before I wanted to say that I've read a lot of biographies and autobiographies and memoirs of musicians over the years, and I think this one is unique and maybe alone in terms of the impact it kind of had on me in terms of the formal structure of the book and also the kind of honesty of the book. But before I ask you about the formal questions about the group, I was just curious about the origins of your friendship and how you guys came to decide to collaborate on this book and how that came to be.
Shall I go a bit, Ted?
You go, man. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, you might know dates better from me. When Ted was a little Ted, a little baby Ted, he was, what year was that? About 90?
It's 1990. 89, maybe 89, yeah.
Yeah, 89. He must have been 90, 89, because he must have been very early head coach interview when we first started. And you were working for a fanzine or something, weren't you?
I was working for a fanzine, that's right.
Yeah, and so I went up and I met Ted and we got on quite, I liked him. This is my take on it. I saw things written by him when sometimes he'd review us or do things over the years. It was like, and then what, way down the line, Ian Damaged was going to oh no, we should do the We Hate the Fucking NME, which was a 45 we did, and some of the people at the New Musical Express got upset by that, but I knew that Ted had put it on his answer phone and he worked there, and I thought, oh, he gets that we're on their side. So that was a very big gold star for Ted. And then so Ian Damaged had someone who was writing a biography. He said, I've got someone who's going to write a biography of you. And this guy used to ring me up, and it went on for 2 or 3 years. And then the guy disappeared. And it, like, I didn't really notice. But then at one point I brought up to Ian, I said, what happened to the guy writing the biography? He said, he moved and no one knows where he is. I said, oh, well, maybe you should ask, maybe ask that Ted guy, because I'd just seen him or something had happened. I said, why don't you ask Ted? Ted Kessler, because he's quite good. Because I'm a bit skeptical of journalists, but because of their reptilian nature. But Ted seemed to be someone who was genuinely interested in the subject, not purely on self-promotion. So I said, well, let's ask Ted, and that's my take on it.
I think that's pretty true. I think I just interviewed you for Q, and that
That's
maybe
probably why I thought of you.
and
Yeah.
that's why I reminded you of me. Also, I mean, I was a fan of Billy when I was a kid. So I mean, I used to go see him when I was a teenager. So I
Yeah.
think I come from it from a genuine admiration of definitely his music and his poetry, because I like both those things before I met him. I
And then you
wasn't
found out what a great guy was. It's even better.
what a fabulous man he was.
It's
Yeah.
just, yeah, I like that, Ted. That's good. I like that. Keep it going.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like
So
the
that's
way
yeah.
the way you described the book inside the book itself was you described it as a mosaic, and it really is a very radical, formal approach to telling a story like this. In the sense that for people who haven't read it, it's kind of a compendium
Me.
of traditional biography as well as interviews and poetry and so can you tell me about the approach and if that was something you guys worked on together as an idea, or is
No,
that something you came
nothing
up
to do. I can tell you the approach we had. I mean, Billy had no input whatsoever into the actual stuff inside the book
Well,
because
the
he
only thing, can I interject? The only thing I said to
can.
Ted is let there be contradictions if there's contradictions. Do some fact checking. I'm not going to read it, and I don't want to know anything about it. If you want some
Yeah.
photos, I'll send you some.
I mean, but he was very helpful at every stage. But I think the reason why it's a mosaic uh, is because it's basically overwhelmed by the subject. Because how do you tell the story of a musician and a poet and a painter and all the other stuff we do unless you kind of include elements of that work within the book? So I had to use poetry. I knew I had to use poetry. I had to use lyrics. I had to use photos. I had to use paintings, and I thought I could use correspondence between us because a lot of Billy's personality is really important to it. So if I just write about his personality, you don't really get the full force of Billy. But if it's actually our conversations, then you get some of that as well. I mean, Billy's a strong character. He's got
But
a strong.
it's your book, though. And I said to Ted, it's going to be your book. He did ask me if I wanted to have any input, and I said no. I said it's your book, and I don't want to be breathing over your shoulder. You do what you want. That's why it's unauthorized, see, because I said he could do it, but said I'm never going to read it.
Which is a big relief, you know.
Yeah, well,
For-
our drummer immediately it came out. Our drummer apologized to me for what he said, and I said, I don't care. You can say whatever you like, because I'm never going to read it.
yeah,
It must be. It's excruciating. It's bad enough reading any type of press, because it's like it's never going to marry what my inner world tells me about it. I mean, even at its best, it's like if I do an exhibition, if I'm not doing the complete layout, I want nothing to do with it. So usually I have nothing to do with it because I don't want half and half. So let someone else, which is unusual for a control freak. Or maybe is a real pointer to what a control freak I am, all control or none.
Yeah.
So in that sense, Ted, though, it must have given you a sense of relief and freedom that you could really tell a story that's really quite complicated with a lot of different personalities and opinions, that you could tell the story as you saw it without having to, because I mean, I think one of the quotes in here that Billy says is that, not everyone is built for the truth.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm a person who may not be built for the truth.
I'm not built for the truth, no.
I think many people are not built for the truth. And I think one of the things that's most inspiring about this book is the degree to which Billy is built for the truth, and the fact that it's allowed to exist in the form of this book is quite exceptional.
I think also that the fact his honesty allows other people to be honest about him too, because there's a lot of people who are honest about Bill within the book. And I think that's because because they know they've dealt with his honesty throughout his life. I mean, there is no filter there, as far as I'm aware, Billy, unless you're playing at some sort of very advanced game on us all.
Yeah, I'm not that sophisticated, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love to be able to do that, and that would be great, wouldn't it? But I've had some people complain about some of the things that people have said in it again, and that there wasn't, some people weren't banged to rights on their lies. But one of the things I said to Ted when he was doing it, I don't know if you mentioned this in the book, Ted, but I would give you a rundown on the psychology of who you were going to interview and the likelihood of them lying. Do you remember?
Yeah, you did, yeah.
You were going to do my big brother, and I said, well, Nick will lie if he won't mind. I won't go into others who would, but there's quite a lot of people who are sort of like. Don't forget that one of the most important things in art, music, and writing is retrospectively placing yourself at the center, which I won't do, which is the weirdest thing with me. It's because, like, I will tell anyone where my influences are, anywhere. I don't know if it says in the book, I was in a group because I had straight trousers and dyed my hair. No ability or qualification whatsoever, which some people say is apparent.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and the honesty is very, very unusual. That's for certain.
And it's also the generosity of allowing full chapters to other voices to be able to talk about things. So you get this kind of prism-like effect where you see very, very complicated personal history examined from multiple places. And I think it's a really, there's a balance and a fairness that is, I think, rare in these kind of books, which are either like build people up to be saints or they tear them down to be like complete assholes. But there's something about the humanity of the book that I think is actually what inspires me, is to see life as something that's very, very complicated, and that is a journey that all people kind of muck through in their manner. But the book allows everyone to have kind of a stake in it and a presentation of it. But ultimately there's one story being told, but you do have the sense that there's I don't know, it was just very unique to have that kind of movement.
I think I could claim some responsibility for that.
Definitely.
I did say, leave in contradiction, let people say what they want and let it be contradicted within it, because I found if I've read books and they don't do that, or trying to cast something in, like you say, as a saint or a devil, the idea of the point of being born on the earth plane is you're on a spiritual path, and hopefully you learn something along the way, and hopefully not be as big an arsehole you were at the end as you were as you managed to get to by 14 or whatever it is, so you're moving through these things. And it's I think it's really good to let people hear both sides of something and then come to the wrong conclusion.
I mean, the fact that Billy was adamant I should speak, not adamant, but he said you should speak to my ex-wife or my ex-girlfriend. There aren't many subjects of a biography who would say please speak to these people I've been in this long romantic relationship with, and hear their complaints about me and make sure you put them all in. That's a fairly unusual stance for a subject, I feel, and it helps massively the book.
Well, because I think there's an appreciation that people can be super important in your life, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy, but that they're significant, and that significance holds. There's a kind of loyalty there that I think is really profound. And one thing I wanted to talk about, I kind of wanted to talk about a few sections of the book that I thought were really unique and very powerful. And the first one for me was the discussion of childhood in the book, which was one of my favorite sections about the book, because I think not a lot of books are able to recreate that feeling of childhood, the kind of permeability or the strangeness. And because I feel like childhood is a time before the grid of adulthood has been pressed down on people. So there's there's an openness to the strangeness of experience. And the book is really beautiful in talking about, Billy, your experiences with some very, very, supernatural type events that happened in your life at that time. But it reminded me very much of the experience of childhood and the strangeness of it, and the kind of mixing of almost like of layers of reality that happens when you're that young, and your sensitivity to it is really interesting to read about. And Ted, I have to say, it has one of my favorite lines in the entire book, is your sentence that ghosts don't self-identify, which I thought was one of the funniest lines I've ever read. But he was discussing some of the ghost experiences, and the ants. There was a dog, an ant the size of a dog, and goblin in a woodpile, and UFOs, but all of this strangeness, it really brought back to me a little bit about growing up in the 60s and 70s, and these times before there was the internet, and even more grid work has been laid down, but a time when there was almost too much freedom and a lot of danger involved in that freedom, but also it was very interesting. So I was wondering if you could talk about that section of the book and your childhood in general, Billy.
Well, yeah, they're all true to my experience, my understanding and my experience, all of those things that I relate there. And I think that you've got you're very sort of insightful and intelligent in your way of looking at things. The one thing that kept springing to my mind when you were talking was the review that was I think in the Times magazine, in Times newspaper in England, where it said that I obviously had a hand in writing the book and the whole thing had been manipulated. And I said to Ted, maybe I think this man needs a good punch. And Ted said, well, I'm not really into violence. And I said, nor am I, but I sometimes wish I was. But because it is really, I don't know, all of those things. My memory is so strong from, I think I lived in such a dangerous sort of situation as a kid, as far as I perceived it. I wasn't in a war zone, but it felt like one. And I was really wide awake to what people were doing in energies and how things were. I can remember things if I talk to my wife about things I remember from when I was 3, it will just go on and on and on, because then I'll just remember something else and remember something else. And I can remember right back, to 2 or 1 year old, certain incidences. And I suppose that I've spent a lot of my life trying to understand what it means to be here. And so I think I've investigated my childhood a great deal for that reason. And also probably because of the search for love, that I was born into a world where there wasn't much of that. And I think probably I've spent the larger part of my life searching for that love, probably in the wrong places and outside, because of course all of these things have to come from our own heart in the end. But getting that reflection of love as a kid can help you in seeing the love that you are, which I definitely didn't get that. And that's not a sob story. That's just that's the journey that's the journey I signed on to.
Yeah. I mean, the absence of love for Billy seems very strong. we were talking about your childhood, that was something that really shone through, how much you wanted love, particularly from your mother, was not very loving, and obviously your
She
dad.
cooked. She cooked and was she had ways of showing her love, June, but she wasn't a cuddler. But
Yeah.
my brother was really pissed because I would make her let me sit on her lap and demand attention, which maybe might explain the output since. I wish we, just look to the mother and see, you can understand the crazy guy, I suppose.
Yeah.
But there's something interesting, I think, for a lot of people, particularly I think people who end up getting into punk rock and things like this, is like people who grow up in situations with a lot of chaos. They also end up finding avenues of freedom that maybe aren't available to other people. And one thing I thought was really interesting in the book was the discussion of your kind of archaeological stuff that you did as a young teenager, exploring development sites in town and waging your own kind of terrorist battles against forces of change that were happening there. And I thought that was really interesting because it reminded me a lot of this, in a time before like surveillance cameras everywhere or people holding cameras in their hands, that this sense of there was a time when you could really be lost in the world in a way without adult supervision, and you could create a lot of things on your own. And it seems to me that your ambition or your ability to create things and to create culture within your immediate context is something that started really early with you.
Yeah, definitely. And meeting sort of like my friend Keith, who was at school with me, and he introduced me to Ian. I actually thought, Ted, that we should have spoken to Ian because Ian was he's still the head of the Upchurch Archaeological Group. And that's when we used to go out in the marshes when I was 14. And that's when we also started the Midway Military Research Group, me and Keith. But all of the things that we got up to and how we did it, I mean, seriously, probably there's things in that book that me and Keith were doing that we would be arrested under Terrorist Act now, because we were
He said that. He
making
said
bombs.
that.
Oh yeah, seriously. I mean, trying to steal nitroglycerine trying to break into the school to get glycerine and nitro to make a mine. This is one of Keith's harebrained schemes that didn't come off. But we had Sten gun and we had Lee Enfields and things. And it's probably in American culture you might not realize how those things are. Weaponry is not available, or definitely not available to kids in England, certainly in the 70s. Everything had to be handmade, and nobody else knew much about it. My friend Keith was a little bit into chemistry, so we were making black powder and messing about, making, and we had the IRA here bombing stuff, just down the road in Maidstone. So it was all a bit, when we used to have to go and buy the ingredients from the chemist, go to different chemist shops and buy ingredients from different counters, and have excuses for why you were buying things. Like saltpeter would have been bought to dust your mother's dahlias. Why do you want saltpeter, Sonny? To dust my mother's dahlias. But a key ingredient, the oxygenator of black powder. Anyway, yeah, childhood. It's like I suppose it's all there, isn't it? Childhood is where it all manifests, and all of this finding out that I wanted that the only thing that really meant something to me, I found sort of solace, was in making pictures and comedy. I love comedy so much.
And starting groups as well. I suppose that's a group as well, isn't it?
Yeah, but all of it's like it's all fun. It's like all of it is. I think I probably must have said to you that everything's a project in my mind. So when I start a new group, it's a project. But as a school kid would do it. This is what we're playing today. Like, you come home from school, what game we're going to do, and people would ask me, and I'd come up with something. And that's again all I've been doing. It's just if you pretend properly, you get, it almost seems real.
Yeah. So yeah, and the next thing I want to ask you guys about was which is something I didn't really realize, was the degree of your involvement, Billy, in the earliest parts of punk rock in England. I mean, I was born in 1965, so I bought the Anarchy in the UK single when it came out when I was like 11 years old,
Well,
and
that's pretty good work.
I would, but I mean, but you were similarly influenced by that same record, but the difference was you could hop on a train from the suburbs and actually see these things happening. Whereas for me, it took years and years. You know, I mean, I saw the Clash and the Ramones and all these bands as well, but I was seeing them at a slight remove, and but
Oh yeah, you couldn't beat it in 77. We sort of got out of it by the end of 77. But I was talking to someone today when we were doing these Ramones tracks, and I sort of saying, my biggest regret is going to see the Clash at the Rainbow in in December 77 instead of the Ramones because I couldn't afford both. And that Ramones show. You see, because I could have seen all these groups again in 78 or 79, but I chose not to because for me it already vanished the thing that we wanted from it. You know, we wanted this. We really believed that it was to be homemade, and when it was like I went to see the Jam very early on playing on the floor at London University. Second time I saw them, they were on a 4-foot stage. Next time they were on a 20 yards away on a high stage with an orchestra pit and seating, and their single came out with a colour photo. And I thought, this is not what I paid my entrance fee for, you know, because I really thought the only thing that drew me into punk rock was that I was really brought up on, I really loved rock and roll when I was a kid. And I'd been brought up on early Stones and Beatles and stuff. And I thought, oh, it's all going to happen again because I hated glam.
mm,
You know, music was nothing to me. In the early 70s, I just used to go along and see rock and roll revival shows with Cole Perkins and things like that when I was 14. And then when punk rock came along, I saw the Jam. Well, I saw the Jam first because I was scared of punk rock, and then I thought, oh yeah, this is gonna be, yeah, you know, I believed that it was the power was thrown back into the audience. You know, it was like gonna be ours.
well, that's
So
the thing. I mean, the great lesson is that no one needs permission, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I think that was the great lesson. But the thing you say in the book that I thought was really interesting is that suburban people, and in America, in some sense, is a giant suburb, took punk rock and the ethics of it quite seriously, maybe in a way that the originators didn't. But they imbibed that lesson of not needing permission, and I think you
yeah,
obviously did.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I always say that we believed the hype and made it
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
And it was really and yeah, don't forget my wife's from California, you know, so she's actually similar age to you, and she sort of like came across punk rock a bit late as well in the same way. Being she was born in '66,
Mm.
but she's sort of like big fan of Ramones. You know, she plays in the group with us, plays bass with us, Julie, and she's from SAC. Yeah, so I'm quite familiar with the American game, and of course, you know that stuff with those Sub Pop kids, you
Right.
know, because I don't know if it's in the book at all, but the reason Sub Pop knew who we were is because Steve had come to England with his dad when he was 15 and went to the cricketers and saw the Mighty Caesars play. And when we were out with Sub Pop, Steve was showing me these photos he'd taken when he was 15 of a Mighty Caesars gig because his dad had work in London. So I
Right.
think a lot of our American people getting who we were in America is down to Steve being really a real record nerd and really into sound
Well,
and what's going
well,
on.
what happened with me was in 1984, I was working in a record shop. I was 18 years old, and
Oh
Ah,
yeah, that's a
classic.
funny
this
record.
record came in, and I looked at it, and I didn't know when it was from. I had no idea. Like one of my favorite books of all time is The Man Who Gave the Beatles Away by Alan Williams, which is
Right.
the Beatles manager before Brian
Yeah,
Epstein.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
read it.
And I was obsessed with that era of the Beatles. And when I looked at this photo on the back, and I had that feeling, I couldn't understand how, I mean, the feeling the photograph transmitted to me was that feeling. And then I put on the record and heard I'll Use Evil with that incredible drum fill. And I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
and so from that point on, this was pre-Fugazi. This is even maybe even before Rites of Spring, I heard this record. And it really, really made a huge impact on me. But the crazy thing is, I didn't find any other records by you till this one, which is which is file under classical. This is a record that is it's very hard to explain how experimental this record is and how dark and disturbing it is as an album.
Yeah.
It's like a meditation on World War I gas warfare, and it might as well be it's as didactic and extreme as anything Discharge ever put out. And so for me, this was what Billy Childish meant to me. So when people say that there was something reductive about the stuff you do, I knew the breadth of it because these were the first two albums that I had.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because the theory is that I've only ever written a song that goes dum de dum dum dum.
Mm. Yeah.
That's all I've ever done, which is quite amusing in itself.
Yeah. I love that Milkshakes record you're holding up, Guy. That was one of my gateways into.
That's Mick sings on that. I Use Evil. I think he wrote the song, and I wrote the riff.
Right.
I mean, it's just this unbelievable riff, and I mean, the record is nothing but unbelievable riffs and an incredible sound. And it was so, like I said, I didn't know if it had been when it had been recorded or who the
that was recorded. That was basically the backing tracks recorded on a G36 Revox in a disused ballet studio, which was sort of like going to be demolished, and there's no heating. It was actually a building that was going to come down, and we used to rehearse in it, and we had to nail old doors and sofas and things against the windows and doors to be able to keep people out and go in and record. Now I think that's that'd be the last Milkshakes record, that one.
Is it really? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I mean, it's like I think the first. I mean, Milkshakes never toured America, right?
No, I don't think anyone was foolhardy enough to ask us, and because we never really had agents or anything. Because even when you saw us, none of that was done with agents. You know, the reason we could play in America was because Mudhoney looked after us because they're good guys. I mean, Sub Pop sort of did, but they didn't give a shit really. I mean, Bruce was okay, but they sort of like it was down to Mudhoney, and then we worked with the makers a bit with Vic, who used to just book a few shows, and we never had agents. And we never really, I think we twice we worked with an agent, once in England and once in America, when we played the Midwest, and we just couldn't be told where we're playing and where to go and driving around. You know, it's not in our makeup. We're too lazy. We never toured really. Essentially, our longest tour in the Milkshakes was on our own in a van in Germany with our friend Hansi booking shows, and that would be 2 weeks max. When I was young, I can't take all of that rock and roll stuff. Johnny in the Headcoats, he played with another group, and the guy in theirs motto was he won't tolerate the rock and roll lifestyle, which we adopted as well.
But there was this mystery about
the cool stuff, you know.
There was a mystery about your bands in the States because there wasn't a constant presence of touring and stuff like that. I mean, my wife is in the band Bikini Kill, and the first time they went on tour in 1992, they flew to London and got out of the airport, immediately got on a train and took it to Brighton, and that night went and saw you play with the Headcoatees like in 1992. So there was this between like the community of people that I knew, there's just this very, very deep identification with what you were doing. And this is something I wanted to talk to you both about, is the concept of scenes, because I think it's a very important topic in the book, and about the kind of the complexity of when groups of people make art together, and the kind of bond that creates in that place, but then also the kind of bitterness and it's a very complicated thing. It's not all
it's families, isn't it?
It's families, exactly. And I feel like it's a super important strain in the book. And I was wondering if you could talk about what it was like because with scenes there have to be drivers, and there have to be like kind of like points of charisma that coalesce a group. And the one thing that the book does that I think I've never seen in a book before is discuss the complexity of charisma as a force. Charisma as something that is important in order to create things that happen and to inspire people, but also as something that can be abused. And I think there was a really interesting discussion of that in the book, Ted, that I've never seen done in a book like this.
Well, that comes from Billy, because Billy's so aware of his own charismatic power, and has also sort of told me to be that he knows he has to be wary of it. Is that right, Bill? Do you think that's a fair
Yeah,
summary?
something along that line. But look, the thing is, because I've been from a young age, I was very interested in spiritual things and Taoism when I was 14 or so. And then I was very interested in, I'd done worked in meditation and in Vipassana and some other simple Buddhist meditations. It's like I've come across people who, you know, I worked out quite early on, put it this way, that music has got, if you've got to beware false prophets, they're going to be in music, you know. And the idea of weaponizing your charisma is obviously a road to hell. And it's not so much I've been wary of it. It must be that I'm quite a good guy in some ways, because I'd never feel comfortable in weaponizing or using my charisma in that sort of a dangerous way. I mean, I'm sure people accuse me of doing it, but I was always very wary of that. And as far as scenes go and things, we spent our time just walking away from scenes and refusing to be the group that people wanted us to be, and refusing the audience that wanted us. You know, we quickly backed out of punk rock where Bruce, the drummer that you mentioned on Old Year's Evil, Bruce is a really great guitarist of the Pop Rivets, and we backed out of the punk rock, went into the rock and roll thing where people weren't so interested in it, made Bruce learn to play drums because he's too good a guitarist. And then we'd end up with sort of mods coming along. So if mods were at the shows, we'd play Chuck Berry, which they didn't like. And then if the rockers came to the show, we'd do some Shirelles numbers or write our own Shirelles numbers. Because, you know, our idea was of, as far as charismas go, me and Mick were the force in the milkshakes, and we were united for quite a while on this quest to for the what we saw as the real heart and soul of rock and roll, which we thought was embodied in this Live at the Star Club by the Beatles.
Mm.
You know, which we sort of like thought, well, this, you know, whereas no pressure, no one cares who you are or likes who you are, because I think that fame and fortune is a very, very dangerous, murderous situation. Because, you know, you would saved from being famous is really important. People who are young who become famous are in so much trouble because, you know, there's the reality checks all go out the window. You know, you need anyone who's left who tells you what an arsehole you are is removed if you can afford it. So it's always good to have people with their checks and balances, use an American term, you know, trying to keep yourself grounded in this thing. And of course, you know, like you've got someone who drives the car, and you can have a good navigator. And if you're in a really good group, everyone sort of like understands who's doing what and why. This has been really interested in painting, because what happens is a lot of painters and artists are very worried, and I've never been worried or hampered by my lack of ability in music, and I've never really felt a need to show off with ability, because I see lots of people have got it and it goes nowhere. And then in painting, because I've been in groups, it's sort of like we find that people who are painters who've played in groups have a much more relaxed attitude towards doing their work. You know, I paint with people interviewing me and chatting and coming around because I'm not doing it for anyone. And the same as me, I'm not doing it for an audience. And this is, I was really lucky meeting Mick, particularly, and maybe Big Russ, a few other people, my wife, Wolf, because we're not ever playing for the audience, you know. We're playing for us. And if the audience get it, that's pretty handy. It's not that we're anti-commercial. It's just, or I don't want to make money or be famous. It's just like it's low down on the list, you know. Everything, before that, and it's nothing to do with integrity either. It's absolutely only what makes me feel comfortable. So it's not strong, my attitude. You know, it's because I'm uncomfortable with charismatics, because I'm uncomfortable with abusing power or position, or uncomfortable with striving or achieving something. It's always got to be about what I'm doing. And
I think this is one of the great mistakes
project.
this is one of the great mistakes people make about integrity, is that they think integrity is a sacrifice when in fact it's a practical solution, you know?
Yeah, or it's like I'm not, I don't think I've got great integrity. It's just what I'm like because I'm uncomfortable outside of it. So I'm doing it from no bravery whatsoever. I'm not sacrificing a damn thing. It's the only thing I can be like. So it's not like, wow, isn't he got some principles? It's like I'd feel very uncomfortable outside of that range, which, you know, so I suppose you could say I'm very moral. There's a few girlfriends probably disagree with that.
But it's interesting though, because in some ways I think that I feel personally that you're underestimated. I mean, as popular as the groups are, and as much as you're beloved, I still think that there's an underestimation of a sophistication that's happening and a real depth, particularly lyrically, in some of the songs. Like a song like "I Hate the Man That I Am," I think that is an incredibly profound song, and in both the version that you did and in the version I've heard Pete Molinari do, and a bunch of, I think it's an amazing piece of work. And then but also in painting, I feel like there's something in your painting that has shifted, like a technique that has occurred. Like I've been familiar with your woodcuts and stuff that you've done through your whole career. There's a luminosity or a light that's coming out of your painting now. I wonder if you could talk about this so that we can quickly, I mean, I know time is probably running out, but I feel like we should discuss the painting to some degree. But within your work as a musician, it seems that you've always been able to attack a problem multiple times from multiple angles and work within a certain, like finding the freedom of limitations. But within your painting, have you found like an extra gear or a new technique or a new spiritualism or something that has entered your work that is, because I feel like there's some light, there's something. I don't know anything about contemporary art,
No,
but
not me really.
but when I look at what you paint, there seems to me that there's something happening that is very profound.
Well, it's that's very kind of you, and it's strangely, you see, because I agree. I think I'm very undervalued as well. I mean, but that might sound strange to people, but I don't have a problem with it. But I think a lot of people are very wrong. You know, don't underestimate what I do, and I know what some other people do think that, but I don't think that's a problem necessarily, in the sense that it's because it only is what it is, and what it is will stand, you know, and it will you know, it will do its job where it needs to do its job at some point. You know, I have a wonderful life, wonderful relationship, you know, with my kids and my wife, and it's fantastic. And you know, so it's like a great life. The as far as the painting goes, is my natural it's my natural environment. And although in the 90s I decided to radically not show any ability in my paintings because I found that would be I found that interesting to me, sort of painting left hand and trying to find the part that painted or acknowledging and going back to the part of me when I was 6 or 7 in the painting, which I think was really helpful to me. But the it's I'm not really the creator of the paintings, which sounds a bit weird, or the creator of anything that I do, because I can't do that. I just do it. So I've done it a lot since I was 2, and I'm probably a bit naturally good with the brushes. I've got a modicum of talent in that way. And because I'm sort of like allow the pictures and the colors to suggest themselves to me, I feel very uninvolved. And probably the less involved I am, the more involved it appears. And yeah, the paintings change slowly, imperceptibly, but obviously, you know, like there's a poem by Charles Bukowski I like somewhere. It was about watching some snail, and people think, you know, it's not moving, and then you go and have a, I don't know, go and have a cup of coffee and come back and it's clean over the wall and gone. That, you know, because Charles sometimes said some sensible things or had sensible observations. So really, it's something that is allowed, and you're a songwriter, so you must know that you can't recreate the same song. You can say, like, I try and I'll do 6 in that area. One of them might be all right. Then with the painting though, you know, I can't control it. I can't quantify how it happens or what it is, but it's a very natural thing. And if I am anything, it would be a creative type. And of course, we live in a world where there's lots of people who want to be creative types. And I think the want bit will be the problem, because, you know, I think it's a natural human state and people are talked out of it at a young age, and then they're trying to express themselves. I don't really try to express myself, you know. I don't try really. I never have the viewer or the listener in mind. I'm never trying to convey anything to them at all, because I've got really little interest in that, because my job is to look at the football I'm kicking. You know, as I've got no interest in the goal. I mean, when I say no interest, wouldn't it be lovely? But that's as far as it goes. Wouldn't it be lovely to score a goal? You know, but maybe that'll happen. But the main thing is you're engaged with the thing in front of you for the sake of what it is. My similarities is cooking. You know, you make the meal, you put how much salt it needs in, not how much you want it to have.
Right.
You're just listening. And of course, you know, I remember doing an interview in San Francisco many years ago with there's me, one of those beat writers, and Henry Rollins, and it's a book they did with interviews. I can't remember what it's called. I'm not sure if City Lights published it or something, but it was it's free. It's interviews with Ferlinghetti is his name. Ferlinghetti, Henry Rollins, and me. And when I did the interview, the guy was absolutely gobsmacked that I was talking about God. You see, he was really worried about that, because you know, one of my favorite quotes is with Muddy Waters said, "You can't do this music without God," which is odd. Well, and you know, you might as well say God's doing it. I mean, if you can be open enough to allow to join in the expression of the universe, and allow yourself to be in your natural state, you know, maybe things will work out. And you don't have to worry then about winning or who's doing what, or you know, you can still try and avoid fame, maybe.
Right. But it's interesting, when I was reading the book and thinking about the modes of your creativity and the relentlessness of it, you know, and the huge scale of it.
Tell me about that, Jesus.
But the thing about but the thing that's interesting is, like, for people who would criticize you when you had, like, you know, to say that you were stuck or something, to me the difference is between, like, I think the modern culture or modern popular culture, the idea of savoring anything for too long is looked down upon. People want to devour.
Also, how the things can happen, like how long it takes a snail to do something. And don't forget, those insults were put to me mainly because I wouldn't get hip and go with the conceptual art world, and wasn't interested in seeing people like you know, several years younger than me taking cocaine. And I actually said I avoided those people in music, so I'm not going to start looking at it in art. And you know, people want to be somewhere and be something and be somewhere, and it be exciting them for a drama. You know, we all know about that as teenagers. You know what happened, And it's like if you refuse that, people, some people will tend to attack.
Right.
You know, because they've got to have some people being wrong, you know. And I mean, if I'm not into what's cool, then that's a judgment of them. If I give up drinking, you know, that's a judgment on them. You know, it's like people take things very personally, and they don't understand that a lot of people don't understand this, how slowly something has to move, because that's how slowly it moves. And if, you know, you look at it over 6 months, nothing's happened, but you look over it 6 years and you're in a completely different universe.
Right.
But
Yes.
apart from music, of course, because when we do recordings, the idea is it should still annoy the geography teacher and should sound like 15-year-olds who don't know what they're doing, which is what I've always loved in music. Because I want to hear something, I think it sounds doing this stuff with my kid, it's great hearing a 14, 15-year-old singing punk rock songs. I think that's what it's meant to sound like, you know. And of course, us being totally immersed in the origins of rock and roll music, blues music, and having the correct lack of ability and very highly attuned sensibilities, can play with the energy and the feeling and the sound of 15-year-olds, because we're not going anywhere, you know. So in a way, you're sort of like I'm talking about two different things there. I'm talking about being incredibly static, and at the same time how something moves forward. I mean, it's quite a fascinating conundrum, isn't it? Because really you're looking at the origin of something. So people say something is an original, but I always say to people, well, the origin of something is what is original. And the origin in the term original doesn't exist, because the origin's the origin. It's not original. I mean, if you're going to have an original take on music, everyone's always looking for, what do you call it? They're looking for a way, and they're looking for, what did Jimi Hendrix say? They said to him, do you use gimmicks? And Jimmy says, well, Vietnam War's a gimmick, you know. This is a gimmick, that's a gimmick. Then he nods and says, yes, we use gimmicks. But it's really good if you look at a lot of contemporary work or what's going on, its originality is gimmick or misuse. You know, it doesn't feed you or bring soul or bring something else to the table. It's just different. The mantra of the human being, more different now, more different now, more different now. And then you're sort of like, wow, you know, it's like you've got to like all this different type of music, even if you've already had a meal, you know, and you've got to throw up and go and have another one.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
Is it time for questions? I don't know whether.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
yes, it
there's
is.
a million things. There's a
Indeed,
million
it
things to
is.
talk about, but yeah, let's do the questions.
Yeah. So Dave says, thank you for all your work. I'm a huge fan, much to the detriment of my shelf space. Was wondering if you could talk a bit about your relationship to Dylan's music and the William Loveday Intention records.
All right, yeah. Yes, I can do that for you. How did that happen? It's funny, it shows you when it's me, isn't it? I can see Ted. Is that right? Do you see me, Ted?
I see you.
Oh, you see me, I see you. And the Dylan stuff, well, that was just a bit of a you've probably heard Bob Dylan's got a lot to answer for, which was the antidote to the Bob Dylan period. I always had an interest in Bob Dylan because my father used to buy Rolling Stones, Beatles, and we had Times Are Changing as well, LPs. So when that came out, I heard that record quite a lot. And then when I left the dockyard, I'd made money in the dockyard, and I forgot about this till recently. I needed to spend some money because I'd never made money before. And I bought some cassettes, and I bought, this is in 76, Beatles Live at the Hollywood Bowl, Best of Bob Dylan, soundtrack to Bugsy Malone, Rock Around the Clock, Rolled Gold Volume 1 by the Stones. Anyway, that type of stuff. Oh yeah, and Buddy Holly. So anyway, I was vaguely aware of Bob, and I always liked the I liked how I thought he wasn't very good, which I didn't realize he was quite good. I sort of like the thing I liked about him was the thing that I thought wasn't very good about him. That was before I got educated. What happened was is it's all the fault of YouTube. During the lockdown, I was listening, because I'm a big Jimi Hendrix fan, and I like Jimi Hendrix in Beatle boots, not in moccasins. So I like Pop Hendrix. And the YouTube, when you watch something, it just tells you to watch something else. So I was watching some early Jimmy live, and then it had All Along the Watchtower, and I've always thought it was overproduced and a bit verbose. So I thought, I wonder what Bob's version's like, and I listened to Bob Dylan's version. I thought, God, that's really, because Bob thinks that that was the great one, Jimmy's version. And I listened to Bob Dylan's, I thought, God, it's really sort of rinky-dink and crappy and really good. I like that. And I said to my wife, "No, maybe we should do All Along the Watchtower." And because I looked All Along the Watchtower, YouTube then said to me to watch Bob Dylan live in 1976. What's the track he was doing? This really great track he's doing. I can't remember what it's called. We did do a cover of it, but my mind's not what it was once. But anyway, he was singing away, and it's in his shouting Bob Dylan period, and he sounded like Joe Strummer, and I really like Joe Strummer's voice. So then I thought, well, maybe we should try and do that. And then I thought, well, if we go into the studio, what happens with me is if I go into the studio, I sort of think, well, we'd better may as well do some songs. So we learn some of them. And then I thought, well, maybe we could do the new and improved Bob Dylan, which amused me as an idea. And then for some reason, that developed into doing 3 or 4 albums. And of course, and I also thought, oh, this stuff's, there's nothing to this. They all go on about what a brilliant lyricist Bob is. And he is very good when he's good. But I thought, well, I can write stuff like that. It's not difficult. So I decided to write some songs which I thought were in that type of vein. And the local studio that we work in was going to go bust because of the lockdown. So I ended up sort of recording about, what is it? How many albums is it? 9, 10, 15 albums? I don't know, to stop Jim going bust. So, and we did some CTMF albums, and we did some blues albums, and we did the Bob Dylan albums. And then there's a period with Bob Dylan, which I really, really thought was really good, like that when they do Like a Rolling Stone live. And then seeing his interviews and then understanding, oh yeah, and then it said that Bob Dylan's main influences, or his main interest was Buddy Holly and Little Richard. And I thought, wow, that's my 2 favorite influences, when I was a kid. So it's quite funny he did that folk game. And then the other day I saw something come up with, I don't really, not really interested in Bob Dylan that much, but YouTube still says to look at things. And I had this song on there, and I can't live with that Mr. Burns voice he does now. Poor fella.
I like it.
Yeah, well, that's good. Luckily some people do.
One fan.
I'm in a minority in most things, Ted. But I thought, oh, I wonder what the lyrics are. So I put the lyrics in it. I think it's really similar to a poem that I wrote. It's sort of, I did a poem, I give myself to them all, that I give myself to them all, or something. And his one was, I've decided to give myself to you. And I looked at the lyric, and I sent it to Julie, actually, my wife. I said, look, Bob can still write a really good lyric. And what I really admired was his refusing to be Bob Dylan, and and the fact that he was always in charge of what he did, which no other musician ever seems to have been. And what really was the icing on the cake is he said, I made bad records on purpose. And I thought, wow, that's the man. That is good. That one quote, I made bad records on purpose. I thought, wow, that is good. I like it.
Well, Nina has a question about enjoyment and pleasure. Do you prefer art or music as a creative outlet?
I just get bored quite easy, but I would think that probably painting I like doing. I need to do that sort of regularly. And at the moment, I was recording today with the flu and recording last weekend, and I will have to mix those songs on Friday. But I can go for a few months without doing music, and whereas painting, it's sort of like something that is my natural habitat, in the sense that I feel very comfortable in that. And if Ted might tell you, if I do interviews, I generally have them come into the studio so I can be interviewed whilst I paint, because I like being distracted from both the interview.
And it's a brilliant thing. I just to interrupt is just to interview Billy whilst he's painting it is a real privilege, because you get to stand amongst these incredible canvases that he does in his studio. And I would also recommend anyone who gets a chance to go see Billy's paintings live, take that chance, because there's one thing looking on the page, but then when you get to see the actual canvas, it's they're pretty awesome.
I've got an exhibition, actually, a small one,
Okay.
in my New York gallery. Are doing one in Cork Street, Lehman Morpin, and that's on the. Look at this, Ted. I know what's happening. It's
But
the
that's almost like I teed up on purpose. I have no idea.
I think it's the 30th of January, the opening. And we're doing a little sampler book. So we're going to do a big selected poetry soon. And Mike, I just did a woodcut for it. For the little, we're going to do a Viper's Tongue select sampler, and then Mike is going to do the Tangerine book a bit, along with Hangman or something, for a decent selected poetry. So that's how I know about it, because they told me.
So Robert there's another question about creative process. Robert asks, do you ever take one specific creative idea and then see how the same idea plays out using different media like paintings, printmaking, music, etc.?
I don't do it sort of like intentionally. Well, I do it intentionally, in the sense that if I was when I went back to the William Loveday intention group, I sort of like thought, when I decided that anyone could write Bob Dylan lyrics, like falling, it was easy peasy. I sort of thought, right, so maybe if I look at some of this crappy old poetry I wrote, I can use that. So it was sort of like very what do you call it? It's not it's just using up stuff in a cynical way, really, I'd say. So I'd sort of like think, well, I haven't got any ideas. Let's have a look at this poetry you wrote. So I'll have a look at the poetry you wrote, and sort of like, no, I'm talking about me, not Bob, and you use some of that. So it does cut across some ways, but it's not usually happening at the same time. It's just when I don't know what to do, because one of my tricks of being able to do a lot of work is I never wait for inspiration.
So Brian thanks you for all your work and then asks, and this is a little off on a different tangent, what's your favorite meal to cook at home?
Yeah.
That's a difficult one, really. For several years I did Ayurvedic cooking, with Indian cooking, vegetarian stuff. What do I like? I don't know. This is a bit of a. It's like, I'm not a cook, am I? So it's if I was a racing driver, what my favourite colour car is. What do I like to cook? I like cooking. I cooked this evening. I'm 48 hours into a fast, and this evening I cooked steak, broccoli, and sweet potatoes for my kid and my wife. Top end stuff as well, and so that shows some willpower at least.
That's
I mean,
incredible. So are you not hungry when you do this?
I'm not sure. I can't. Sometimes I fast for like longest I do is about 6 days. I'm not sure how long I'll do this time. I'm just what am I in, about 48 hours now? Yeah. I'm not sure. I'll just see, because sometimes I don't feel very good, and I try and balance my mind and body out. I'm I'm the princess and the pea, you see. So anyway, I'll cook. I can cook all right, like I can do bacon and eggs. When we're in the milkshakes and we're touring around in our old broken down van around Europe, I would get up in the morning and I would make bacon, eggs, tomatoes, tea, and I'd also give them a good tot of rum in their tea. And I'd get that whilst they were all snoring and do all the cooking. I can be a bit of a mum. I can be a bit of a mum in the nicest sense. Not in an unloving way, in a loving mum way.
Well, before we wrap up, Guy, Ted, did either of you have any final thoughts or comments?
I mean, my thought is just to thank Guy for his excellent helming of the conversation earlier, because I know how hard it is to pin us down, and he did a fantastic job, and so I'm very grateful, and it was a real honor to meet him as well. So
they were really nice to us for Guernsey. They asked us to a few gigs, and I concur. I think that he sounds like a very intelligent, thoughtful gentleman. And
yes,
I appreciate it as well.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say, I read this book twice. Once when Johnny, my friend who runs Akashic Books, gave it to me, and then once to prepare again for this interview. And I'm not saying this to blow smoke, but I really think that even for people who don't know the music, it's a really masterful job that you did, Ted, to make something that is quite profound, I think, and a real service, I think, to people who want to know more about not just about Billy, but also about like a way of working in the world. I think it's really, really important that people, I mean, I feel like there's like, if anything, I think Billy has been at war with gatekeepers his entire life, and gatekeepers in music, gatekeepers in
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
poems and in painting and all these things. And it's really, really important that there are examples of people who fight these fights and do it with such style. So I think it's a
What I
pleasure.
always wanted was to be sort of sometimes I'm a bit contentious and a bit arseholey, but it's because I've always wanted to be we're back on the love thing. I've always wanted to be accepted for who I perceive myself as, you know, so not really sort of like play up to people. It's a good line from Dostoevsky I always liked in Brothers Karamazov, when he said he gives evidence against himself, the character, which I sort of like feel that I often do, which I think is a nice, but you know, I've done things where people have banged me to rights when I've actually gone along to the police station and handed myself in, and they say, gotcha, and handcuff you. And I say, I just told you that I've handed myself in, you know, and probably given myself some bad press at the same time.
Well,
can I make one final plug for the book? There's a multitude of poems that are reprinted in this book, and there's one by Wolf Howard that's in this book that is worth $39. So
It's very funny, yeah.
So, and just an amazing amount of beautiful poetry as well, which is, I think, a unique thing to do in a book like this.
It's not that bloody poem about Madame Two Swords, is it?
No, it's not.
That's something anyway. There's one where he's like he mocks me because I told him, I said up until about age 50, I thought it was called Madame Two Swords.
Right. No, it's not. No,
anyway,
it's the one about computers and wanting to
oh yeah, that is quite amusing.
Yeah.
I remember that. Wolf plays with drums with us.
Well, gentlemen, thank you ever so much. Oop. I'm sorry, Guy, go ahead.
I was just saying, pleasure to see you again after so long. It's been since 2002, and great to meet you as well, Ted. And thanks for hosting me at City Lights. It's
you say you're in. Where are you based, Guy?
I'm in Brooklyn. So if you're coming to
Brooklyn, wrong side of the planet. I go there sometimes because my New York gallery's in New York, not in Brooklyn, but it's in the now Ponce East Side.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, so Lima Morpin are down there, and I do sometimes go when I have an opening there. So maybe we'll catch up.
Let me know when you have an opening. I want to come down.
All right, you keep your ear to the ground as well, because I'm rubbish.
Yeah. All right, I'll be on it.
And of course, if the three of you come through San Francisco, give us a little nudge. We'll give you a
Well,
tour.
I'll
of City
be coming.
Lights.
We're bound to come through because Julie's got family out in Sac, and we could go through them. We go up to Nevada City as well. And I do quite a lot of paintings in that area.
Cool. Give us a nudge. We'll give you a tour of the shop. Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Well, thank you all again. Much appreciate you gracing our virtual halls. And for those of you in the audience, thank you as well. And I also want to take a moment to thank Johnny Temple and everyone at Akashic Books for all that they do. One of our country's great indie presses, producing some fantastic stuff year after year. Also, special thanks to Steve Lowe for providing us with those wonderful, wonderful limited editions. And I'm encouraging all of you, if you're interested in those, shoot me off an email. I will send you a list of what we have. And today's event has been made possible by support from the City Lights Foundation, keeping me dutifully employed and also fostering an active engagement with books, literary culture, and so on through our public events, our publishing program, and all our educational outreach dedicated to sustaining a vibrant community of readers, writers, and independent thinkers. So best for the new year to you all. Keep warm and dry. Take care. We hope to see you all again soon. Cheers, everybody. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
Bye-bye.
Keep in mind that publisher with the new novel.
Yeah. Speak to you soon, Bill. Bye, everyone. Nice to meet you.
All right. Take care. Much love.